Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be able to sit down with a billionaire and learn straight from them? And today's episode is going to be for you because I'm going to break down the top 10 things that I learned from speaking with someone who is well on their way to $1 billion. Come on in and let's grow together. Well, you guys, welcome back to the Difference Podcast, where we interview 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs and investors. And I got to tell you, today I am so excited about this episode. About a year ago when I started to think about how I wanted to give back to humanity, how I want to serve the world, what are some of the gifts that God's given me, but how I can make an impact for people like you that are tuned into this podcast. The thing that kept coming back to me is I got to sit down with people who are making a difference, like people that are building huge brands, huge businesses. And I started to think about myself. When I was 32, 33 years old, I had big dreams. I just didn't have the game. I didn't have the blueprint to help me go from where I was to where I ultimately wanted to be. So in today's episode, I get to tell you about a conversation we had with a CEO, a founder, and a very, very successful investor that I went out and visited just a few months back in Las Vegas, Nevada, and had to sit down with them. So today, you guys, if you see me shuffling around the paper, it is only because I didn't want to leave anything out for you. I want to give you as much value as humanly possible. I want you to leave knowing exactly not only the mindset, but the tool sets that you can take away from this and start to implement into not only your own businesses or your own brands, but your own portfolio. So we're going to dive into the 10 lessons I learned from interviewing a future billionaire. And today I just want to pull the curtains back on that and give you a peek into the conversation. So a little bit of a backstory is when I got to Las Vegas, if you guys follow me, I did a podcast tour. And when I go into a city, I try to batch a whole bunch of interviews. I want to hit as many people as possible in that city, whether it's, Los Angeles we were in yesterday, or Las Vegas, or, I was up in Utah, so on and so forth. But even just walking into the facilities of this particular entrepreneur, you could feel something was different. There was a different energy. There was a different vibe. Even when we got greeted at the door, it was just people that you knew they were focused on one mission. And that mission was to really elevate and to disrupt Silicon Valley and to disrupt really the big players in the AI space. And so even just sitting down on the couch and really getting to meet this founder, meet their team, hang out, you could just tell it was different. And they weren't really looking for singles or doubles. They were looking for how can we scale something that could potentially, 10x, 20x, maybe even 100x. And it was just different, man. It was just different. So these 10 lessons really shifted the way that I looked at money, the way I looked at my own investment portfolio and strategy, which I'll dive into towards the end of this episode. But one thing it definitely helped me do was it definitely helped me start to incorporate AI into my own business even more than I was. I would say from 2 months ago until now, I spend more time with AI and implementing AI into what I do on a daily basis than I ever have before. So let's jump into it, man. These are going to be the 10 lessons learned from interviewing this future billionaire. And let me just pause real fast because 10 years ago, it wasn't even a goal. It wasn't a goal to have a conversation with someone who was a billionaire. Like that wasn't a goal of mine. I would say, man, even when I was making 150,000, maybe even 200,000, I still wasn't investing. And I would say I still didn't even see myself as a businessman or a business owner, even up until that time. And so even during that time, like sitting down with someone who's a billionaire wasn't like this really huge desire for me. But I think as I start to move into the investing space, as I start to move into the investing world, and as I start to meet more and more people that were in private equity, angel investing, that had, those sort of strategies, it started to teach me that if you're in the right investing strategy, then you can reach $1 billion. And I think around that time was when I started to think like, oh, it would be cool to learn from these people, not because we idolize them at all, but you and I have to agree that there's probably some things that they know about business and investing that we can take, that we can learn from. So let's dive into it. Number one is they see problems as capital opportunities. And one thing that I learned from him is most of us run away from problems, or we reflect problems, or we try to deflect problems. One thing that I learned about him was he really welcomed problems, especially problems in the marketplace, because he saw that as an opportunity to create something that answers that problem. And to him, the bigger the problems, the bigger the potential profits. And he said something that really struck with me. He said this, he says, the bigger the problem, the bigger the paycheck. And so he didn't run from issues. He looked for scalable ways to really solve them and then monetize them. So in his industry, it is like hospitality meets travel, meets social media, meets like TikTok. And so what is the big problem? The big problem is it's not a streamlined process, or as a streamlined process to be able to travel the way that you and me want to travel. But it's also, there's a lot of people that are gravitating to AI and social media right now. So how can I make that more of a streamlined process? And then, oh yeah, we're at a point in time in the world where there are, everybody that you meet is a social media influencer, but you'll be amazed about how often people have clout, have cameras in front of them that don't have any money. So he wanted to figure out, how can I now create a platform that gives these social media influencers the ability to make money? And so there's like 3 or 4 problems that are all wrapped up in that the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the profits, the bigger the paycheck, but also the ability to be able to make a bigger impact, which they are after as well. So I think look for a problem that's out there in the marketplace, and then don't do what even I have often wanted to do, which is kind of divorce myself from those problems, but look at those problems as an opportunity to create a scalable business. Number 2, I learned right away that the way that he thought was just different, man. Like Rain Man different. Have you ever seen that movie with Tom Cruise and I think it's Dustin Hoffman? And it's called Rain Man. But if you remember in that movie, like Rain Man, you could show him numbers and you could see his mind just racing. Have you guys seen that movie? And you could see his eyes almost fluttering a little bit. That's how my experience was here. And the one thing that I took away is it was so evident that he didn't think in terms of days, but he positioned himself in his company to think in terms of decades. So I don't even know. I know that we were sitting down in an interview, but I think his mind was like 10 or 20 years out in the future. And so what he started to express that worked so well for him is because he's thinking 10 or 20 years out, he's also thinking about the opportunities and the problems that are 10 to 20 years out. And how can he now start to speed up the times with systems and automations so that he can play the game that's a 10 years out in the future game and start playing that today. And so he really wanted to raise the bar. They're at a point right now to where they've already raised over $20 million of capital. And what the game plan is to take 5 to 10 years to really build something. And by the way, because he's thinking in decades, he also knows that is not his number one priority to get paid right now. Listen to what I'm saying. It is not his number one priority to get paid right now. So he is even willing to endure the suffering maybe of going 5 to 10 years of building something that's great without necessarily getting a paycheck, right? Now, I believe, as I'm going to go over, because part of his philosophy is to actually have a business that is cash rich and that has a cash flow. But I'm just talking about the mindset here that I think we can all get, that we can all have illuminate to us, is that he's thinking in decades out in the future than he is in days. Let's go into number three. Number three, he hires ahead of his need. It was so funny just walking into his office and just asking about different sections of the office. Who works in there? Who works in there? Who works in there? Who works in there? And the one thing that he said was he was at a point to where he was adding more staff into the company. And at one point I said, why? Like, it doesn't seem like you need them right now. And he says, well, we may not need them right now, but we are going to need them in 6 to 8 months. Listen to that. He's already have determined where they're going to be 8 months from now. And he's already started to hire a staff of people to fit where they're going to be instead of where they're at right now. So he said, you'll always be behind if you wait until you're drowning to bring help. So they build teams for the companies before they're actually coming. So they build the team for the company they are becoming, not the one they currently are. And that blew my mind. And it blew my mind because of how forward thinking he is. Like, listen to me. Most of us that watch this podcast are, we're starting a business, we're in business, we're investors, we're doing our thing. But all of us can be thinking like this in terms of, I'm building the team for the company I'm becoming 5 years from now instead of the team that I currently am. So I love that. Number four lesson that I learned from this future billionaire that I want you to take away. He invests in access, not just in assets. He was telling me about, they're in Las Vegas. And so he was telling me about all of these functions that he has paid upwards of $50,000 to attend just because certain people would be in the room. In fact, he says that annually he makes it a point to spend at least $200 million just to put himself in the right rooms. Listen to that. So as we hear that, I'm thinking, well, is it cool for you and me to maybe invest a couple $100 to put ourselves into a room that's going to help elevate us? And it really made sense to me because I know in order to elevate, you're going to have to separate. In order to have a breakthrough, you're going to have a breakup. But in order to have a breakthrough, you're also going to have to be willing to invest in getting that breakthrough. And so even someone on his level with a company that's gone into Silicon Valley and really started to disrupt the AI space, right? Like, even with a company like that, he still sees how highly necessary it is to put himself in the right room because he wants access, not just assets. So he says a dinner with the right person can be more valuable than the deal itself. Dinner and a deal. So I ask you, whose rooms do you need to be in, right? Who do you need to rub elbows with? What investments do you need to make in your space so that that dinner potentially is more valuable than your future deal? Number five, he was ruthless with focus. I have to laugh about this section because you guys know I have 4 kids, right? I have 4 kids, 14, 10, 6, and 2. And even before launching today's episode, I had to make sure I was daddy first. I stepped in with my 6-year-old, and I needed to keep him busy, so I had him looking at his portfolio. And so he was going through the top 10 holdings that he has, and he was asking daddy about the positions in the companies and how the companies were going. And he asked me, in 20 years, what is his portfolio going to be worth? And is it going to be worth more than his oldest brother, Ezra, at the age of 14? So, that's me. I find value in being a family man and being a father. But this particular individual who's on his way to becoming a billion, and they're certainly going to sell this company for over $1 billion, but he's not a family guy. And in fact, he kept getting on me because I'm a family guy, not getting on me, but, saying, I can imagine what it's like to have 4 kids. And for him, his business is his baby, right? Like, his business is his baby. Now, we all have different values and the things that we value, but I'm just trying to tell you how focused he was on his baby. Just as focused as I am on my 4 little babies, his business is his baby. So he says every yes costs them more than it costs you. Let me just say that again. Every yes costs them more than it costs you. So he's figured out, he knows that his yeses are valuable and his nos are valuable. Even in fact, if you go back and you just watch, I'm not saying his name for a reason, but if you're, you tune into my podcast all the time, just go back and watch previous episodes and you'll see that in a moment in this particular episode, he flips a coin. And he says, if it lands on heads, then we'll do the thing. If it lands on tails, then we'll not do the thing. And if we do the thing, we're going to do it with all of our power, our might, and our wisdom and our knowledge. If we're not doing the thing, then I let my no's be no's. And what this does is it gives him time and it allows him to be able to focus on the number one baby in his life right now, which is his business. So he doesn't just say no to distractions. He builds systems to eliminate them all together. And believe it or not, just that coin flip is part of the system. So, and he's ready to sacrifice everything. He does not want to be married. He does not want kids. He wants to be able to do the thing that really, really he feels called to do and wants to give all of his energy to, and that is to build businesses. Now, I'm not saying that that's your dharma or that's your future. I just am trying to illuminate how focused he is. And the question I would have for you is, can you develop that amount of focus in whatever it is that you're doing? Whether that's building your business, building your portfolio, building your family, building yourself, building your brand, building whatever, your real estate portfolio, can you have that focus? Number 6, he assessed over cash flow before valuation. And I thought that this was interesting because, I've had a chance to be an early stage investor in a handful of companies now at this point. I'm 44 years old. And I would say a lot of founders have different ideas of what success looks like for them. And, I have invested into venture funds to where they have already started to plan an exit way before the company is cash flowing, and the company is nowhere close to even being profitable. But their exit strategy is that they can sell this thing before cash flow. For this particular individual, that was not his strategy. It was almost like that cash flow was correlated with winning for him. Like that cash flow, that this company is going to be profitable and we're going to have cash just flowing in here. And that seemed to be almost like a badge of honor, which I appreciated, honestly. And I think that I appreciate it. I think from an investor standpoint, I really don't care. Like, I love that we have an exit strategy that we can sell and make 2, 3, 5, 10x on our money. Great. But I did love the fact, maybe because I'm a, past, college football player and athlete, but I love that he took it on himself to really say, a big part of my mission is to make sure that we're profitable even before we start to talk about evaluations or sell the company. And I think that just told me something, not that it was an integrity thing, but it definitely told me something about his competitiveness. And that is the one thing that I think that I've seen over and over again with people who are on their way to billions or already at billions. I've been part of a mastermind to where my direct mentor had built a multi-billion-dollar company. And so that competitive spirit is something that I see that really sets these people apart. So I ask you, where's your competitive meter? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say you are? You know, are you a 5? Are you a 7? Are you a 9.5? I could tell you that he was like a 9.99, right? So that competitive spirit is something that I really love. Number 7, he delegates everything but genius. And I love this about him. Yesterday I was on a podcast up in LA and I was being interviewed and I was just talking about how I love delegation. Like I love building teams. I love putting people in places to where they could really shine. And oftentimes that is the bottleneck as to why maybe a person can't go from $1 million to 10 million or 10 million to 50 million or 50 million to 100 million or 100 million to, you know, so on and so forth, is they're not great with leveraging. And the one thing that you could see was evident from walking into his building was the sort of not just team unity, but his ability to put people in the right place so that they could win. So he really understands. This is what he says: if it's not in my zone of genius, I let it go. Let me say that again. If it's not in my zone of genius, I let it go. And I love that because, again, it goes back to focus. Let me focus on the things that I'm really good at, and let me put other people in positions to handle things that they are really good at. Number 8, he leads with values, not vibes. And I think that that was the thing that, you know, we all have a different sort of cultural normative. And what I mean by that is like my culture for my company is going to be different from your culture from your company, just like my college football team's culture was different from, you know, University of San Diego's college football team culture or something like that. So, but I think that the values that we lead with speaks highly. And right away, you could tell that they ate culture as like it was a strategy for breakfast. And what I meant by that is as soon as you meet him and then you met everybody else in that organization, you could see how they've adapted to and adopted his principles and his values. And that culture was set, man. It was strong. I mean, even you walk in there and you just saw like dudes just were like, you know, like these buff dudes and like, and it wasn't even about that. It was just about a mentality. Like you could feel the energy, the passion, the compassion, the readiness, the like they were hungry, super hungry. Everybody, even down to the social media team, like everybody was hungry. And I love that. So mission, core values, and principles drive decisions. It's not just about scaling fast. It's about scaling right. So as you are leading your team, as you're leading your family, what are the things that you're really looking for and looking to implement? And I would tell you, for me, for sure, the number one thing that I'm looking for as I'm expanding teams is integrity. And I always say things like, man, if you are the type of person that can't do the right thing when nobody's looking, I don't want you. And if I feel nervous about leaving my wallet around you when I walk out of the room, I don't want you, right? And if I feel like you haven't bought into the mission, then this is not the right place for you. And I could sense that so much. And that's why I put down, they leave with values, not with vibes. Okay, number 9, they multiply wins across multiple vehicles. What I meant by this with this particular entrepreneur and investor, if you go back and look at our podcast, that's what I love about the difference, because I'm really after what makes you different. Like, how are you a 7-figure earner, 8-figure, 9-figure? How have you built these businesses? How have you built 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure portfolios, right? They're like, what is it? What is the difference? And what makes you different? These are the two questions that I'm always after. And so I asked a lot. It was probably, to me, my favorite episode where the entrepreneur got into their investing strategy. A lot of times they keep it pretty broad, but this time he really dove in deep into what his investment strategy was for himself outside of his company, but what was his personal investment strategy. And what I noticed right away was, he's multiplying wins across multiple vehicles. So he's got his business that's growing in revenue, and that potentially we're building out all the systems so I can eventually scale it and so that I could sell it. Okay. If I sell it, he says, I want it to be a unicorn, and I'm not selling it for anything less than $1 billion. That's great, because he's got equity stake in that company. So when he sells it for $1 billion, that's going to be a big payout for himself, for his investors, for his limited partners, for everybody that is involved with his company. That's awesome. That's from the company standpoint. How can I take the money that I'm making from the company and now put it over here to where I can maximize all the different vehicles? How can I take this money and how can I put it into private equity? How can I take this money and how can I create maybe venture capitalist funds? How can I take this money? How can I put it into real estate? How can I take this money and how can I put it into 77 plans or high yield savings? Like, how can I now have everything work as a cohesive unit to where this money is making more money and this more money is making more money over here? And so now we created an echo chamber of echo income, right? All of these funds and this income that is flowing in without you needing to be there or do anything. Wow. And so it's just so important, it's so apparent to me how focused he was on that as well. Because usually I just hadn't heard it that way. And I think that's why you're going to see compounding or compounded interest work so much in his favor. Number 10, he thought in terms of legacy and not lifestyle. And I think this one resonated with me the most, if I could be honest with you, because early on in my career, I was really focused on lifestyle. If I could go back and do anything, I would change my focus. My focus was on income. How much income can I earn every year? And then at some point in time, maybe about 8 years into the journey, I realized my focus was off. I was learning how to be rich and I was building something to be rich, but I wasn't learning how to be wealthy and how to build wealth. And the thing that I took away from him was he is really building things for legacy, not lifestyle, because inherently, if you keep that lifestyle too high, it is going to impede with the cadence and the velocity that you're going to be able to do things. Why? Because you're limiting your ability to have more resources. So what I loved about him is, I walk in and I go and sit with him, and man, he is so unassuming. Jeans and some sneakers and a t-shirt and just a extremely modest lifestyle, even though before building this company, he's already exited out of 2 or 3 other companies. So the funds are there, but that is not the thing that's driving him. What's driving him is legacy. So he said, this was his advice to me was, Jamil, your kids don't need millions. They need the mindset. And you guys know that's what I'm after. And that's why I call my company Think Life is different, because without the mindset, then the money is going to go bye-bye. I've seen it happen so many times in the last decade. And so that legacy piece was huge for me, because it shows there's more focus on impact and generational change than the material that shows it off. And you guys know me, I'm just not about the material stuff. I'm just not. It doesn't tickle my fancy, right? Like, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't tickle your fancy. I'm just saying for me at 44 years old, it really is about legacy and impact. I know at some point in time, I'll be dead. And maybe that will be in another 40 or 50 years, but I'm not going to be here forever, and neither are you. And so that legacy really spoke to me. I think the big contrast that I took away from someone who is maybe making 6 figures and someone who's making 7 figures and someone who's on their way to $1 billion, the big contrast I really think is mindset. And I hate to keep going back to that, but I just think about myself. 10 years ago, I made 6 figures. But even though I was probably bringing in, I don't know, maybe $130,000 a year, and I didn't invest. I did nothing that I just talked about on, I was over $200,000 a year and still had not invested a penny. And I think about that now, and I think about what was I thinking? Like what was going on in here? What was going on with my mindset? And I think what I find from, someone who is just kind of starting out, they're at 6 figures, they're scaling, they're even more, is they just think differently. And because they think differently, eventually that creates different habits. And then these habits actually will dictate your actions. And your actions are going to dictate your reality. And so if your mindset is taking you to doing certain things, and as you do certain things, then we really fall into these patterns. And these patterns are going to lead us to these different actions. And these actions are going to give us the reality that we see. I stay at 6 figures, I scale to 7. From 7, I go to 8, 9, 10, or maybe on my way to $1 billion. So I hope that today's episode has brought you tremendous value. I don't know how many of you guys will or have the desire to sit down and learn from a billionaire. But I got to tell you, it's a pretty cool experience, because you get to start to juxtapose how they are doing things and how you're doing things. And you can start to steal, literally rob their knowledge while you're right then and there. So I hope that you take this information and you rob this knowledge as well. If you love the podcast, if you love the episode, make sure to subscribe, give it a thumbs up. Most important thing that you can do is share it with someone in your world that wants to level up like you do as well. Until the next one, we'll see you next time.